Let's start with South Carolina at Georgia. We know how this rivalry's gone in the past. It's been funky. We've seen great Georgia teams lose to average South Carolina teams and vice versa. So I would never count South Carolina out in a matchup like this. I don't think they're going to beat Georgia. I'll start with that. But at the same time, there are some question marks with Georgia's health. They've been beat up throughout fall camp, and they continue to have problems, at least as of this moment. Javon Bullard has an ankle sprain as of right now, a little bit unknown as to whether or not he's going to be available. He's the safety. Wide receiver Ladd McConkey has been out the last couple weeks. Back injury suffered at the end of fall camp, which is concerning too, especially for a wide receiver that has such big play potential. You got Dylan Bell, who's been filling in at running back. He's healthy, by the way, but he's a wide receiver that's playing some running back because they're so beat up in the running back room. So it's just been I'm not going to say it's a mash unit by any stretch. You got Austin Blasky. You got guys that have been out that hopefully can make their way back. But right now, at least early in the season, Georgia's depth being challenged, but in a good way. I think you're getting some young guys in there and guys that you know you can rely on. Like, for instance, we know Ladd McConkey's fine. Like, we don't need to see him right now against lower level competition and or against South Carolina to know that he can be a factor down the road when the level of competition increases drastically. Another thing that I'm watching with Georgia, the offensive line has not, I know it's a very talented group. I know it's a very capable group, but as of right now, I don't feel like they're playing their best football. Wouldn't expect them to be. It's week 3. Several offensive lines across the country have been underwhelming, at least up to this point, but we're talking about a group that's even really only allowed 1 sack. But it's really been the run game. And I know, like I said a moment ago, they haven't really had a real long list of healthy, active running backs that might be difference makers. But you think about they're averaging just 129 yards per game and just 99 against Ball State. So as you ramp up level of competition, you would like to think that Georgia can take some of the pressure off the passing attack with a capable run game. How does South Carolina make this thing interesting? Of course, okay. Few reasons why I think they're going to have to operate at a ridiculous level just to make it interesting. And even if they do all these things, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to win. But here's what they have to do to make it interesting. Spencer Rattler's got to be absolutely out of control. And he has been excellent so far this year. Granted, last week, take it with a grain. You go and you play like you played against lower level competition, you're going to roll. But we're talking about a guy right now that's thrown for about 700 yards in 2 games. And you look at how he played, especially under duress against North Carolina. I mean, he was running for his life, having to extend plays, having to get the ball out quick. It was not ideal circumstances for Spencer Rattler, but I think he showed some of his maturity. I think he showed that he was going to hang in there. He's going to battle. He's going to do the best he could. There was a few lapses in situational awareness, like maybe the 4th and 19, where he threw a comeback at 8, 9, 10 yards. That's a shot where Dowell Loggins is designing a throw that's going to go to the end zone, and Rattler threw it underneath because they were playing very soft in coverage. Even if it's picked, you still got to throw that ball. Either way, he has been very accurate, and I think he's been really solid when it comes to being good enough to extend plays and allow his receivers a little bit more time to uncover. Last year, Spencer Rattler didn't look comfortable at all against Georgia. I mean, at all. Granted, different offense, different style, more mature, further along as far as his own development. So last year, people are pointing, well, he's 13-25 last year, had 2 picks, all this other stuff. I think he's a much better player this year than he was when he faced the Bulldogs last year. He's not going to run. It's not who he is. All of last year, he just had 46 yards rushing. But he can buy time. But I think against Georgia, Dowell Loggins has got to be real smart about putting him in a position with that offensive line that has some question marks, might be going young, even in a couple places with some freshmen that got thrust into the lineup last week. They're going to have to be really smart about how they attack, how much time they take, and how quickly they're getting the ball out of his hands, and slow the pass rush with some screens and some things that might be a little bit of misdirection. So he's got to play out of his mind. The offensive line has to be so much better than they've been. 2 weeks ago was terrible. I'm not going to try to put a silver lining on that. It was a terrible performance by the offensive line going against North Carolina. North Carolina had one of their best performances in the last 25 years as far as rushing the quarterback. So many missed tackles. There's so many plays made behind the line of scrimmage. So the offensive line has to play the best game of their life against an excellent defensive front. And then thirdly, I think South Carolina absolutely has to have a massive play in special teams. Now, they've had this in the past, whether it's a return touchdown, whether it's a couple of faked punts, whether it's a surprise onside kick like we saw against North Carolina 2 weeks ago, whether it's a fake field goal that they end up taking to the house. They're going to have to make 2 or 3 plays on special teams that could flip some of the momentum in the game. They're got to pin Georgia inside their own 5-yard line. But either way, Georgia has a significant advantage in this game and should win the game comfortably. But I would be surprised if South Carolina doesn't look better than they did 2 weeks ago against North Carolina.